This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions.
First thing I wanted to talk about today was to do something that's been fascinating me for some time, and it's to do with social media. So in my lifetime, we've emerged from no internet to Google being a very strong player, and then we've evolved into social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Snapchat, whatever it is. I'm going to miss one. You know that they are big players in the world now. They are now big corporations rather than small startups, but they all started as startups. Some in a local garage, some Facebook working with Peter Thiel that gave him the investment, etc. So it's adapted even in the last 10 years from social media. So that's an interesting point. I wanted to start off with saying that it can be, as the user, let's take it as the individual user at the moment, it can be a positive and a negative thing. So positive, it can join and link people. You can get in touch with people that you haven't spoken to or seen for a very long time. That can be very uniting and bring old friends together, which it was when we first started Facebook. It was really to bring people together. And when I first joined it, I was linking up with people that I hadn't seen or spoken to for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or 15 years or whatever. So in that way, and one of the sort of main driving forces for Facebook is to be able to unite people and bring people together. So, and then you look a little bit differently with Twitter, which was all about posting your ideas, your thoughts, comments. And these were the main two that have sort of evolved. And I'll talk about Snapchat and Instagram a little bit later. But the positive definitely is that it can bring people together, unite people around causes, around ideas, around concepts. We're seeing a lot of media with news events when things are happening in controversial areas of the world. There's now always a hashtag or a @ sign with somebody who is commenting on the news. So in that way, it can be incredibly positive and can be used for as a means as positive. On the flip side, it can also be very negative, and this should be talked about more, I think, because it can be linked to depression. If you're linked to a lot of people and all you see is when you're sitting at home, maybe you're single on a flat in London or wherever on your own, and you're on Facebook and you see all these people traveling to different places, or they are going to these events in the evening, and it paints a picture that everyone is completely absorbed by this wonderful life that they're leading. And it makes you feel quite isolated. So actually the flip side is from it trying to unite people, it can also isolate people and make people quite depressed because they see other people being more successful. And so it really is it can be a very negative. And I would say that this is something that should be talked about in schools, in universities, in colleges, so that people, and often the youngest people are most affected by these things. Obviously, you could still be your mid-30s, living in a flat on your own and not having the lifestyle that you want, and you see all your school friends or university friends, married, kids, whatever the thing that you want. There will be someone on Facebook, or probably a number of people on Facebook, who are doing what your ideal lifestyle would be. So just be mindful of that it can be a negative force just as much as it can be a positive force. Something I wanted to Facebook has really, I really was interested how Facebook has changed primarily as I said at the start, just uniting people together to basically an advertising platform for famous people, companies, whatever it is, to be able to distribute video content. So there's a couple of people that I follow. No surprise in the names. I've mentioned them many a time. But there's musicians that I follow that are on there. There's also so it's business people. There's also sporting interests and things. So and I find now that I use Facebook more as a sort of video content rather than, I don't really care what people are doing, and they don't really impact really my life very much. So so to be honest, I now look there for video content to see if I'm got a spare 5 minutes, what can actually keep me occupied while travelling or whatever it is. I would also say that some of the younger, I'd say some of the younger tools like Instagram or Snapchat, they can be quite faddy. So 6 months ago, everyone was talking about Snapchat and about the capabilities that it had. And to be honest, I saw a limitation in that. Putting a monkey face on someone didn't really do it for me. I can see the novelty value, but I know they started trying to link themselves to advertising and to releasing content on there. And I must admit, I've never actually I haven't got an account on Snapchat, but I know people that have, and things that they've talked about, and they've found it very entertaining. But I kind of found that quite limited. So as I say, I was interested when they started linking themselves, I think it was to the NBA, and trying to get content on there. But what we found is that Instagram, in the last, as I say, 6 months or so since Snapchat had its peak, Instagram has really taken over as the most fashionable social media medium at the moment, and I can see why it is quite useful, because I don't use it again very much because I can't really take a good photo. And maybe that's a little bit limiting what the uses for Instagram are, because I have got an account and I have had a quick look, and people do video content as well on there, but you find a lot of people if they're traveling around, take pictures on planes or sites or whatever. And to be honest, what I did see when I was on there, people take some really good photos. I just don't have the eye to take a photo. So I'm kind of turned off on Instagram. What I do use a lot is Twitter. Now I've had an account, for a while now, and I've actually found it quite useful for providing video content. A nice 2-minute video blog that I give all my thoughts and ideas. I find quite succinct. I like the medium. I like the way it delivers it. So that's the main place. Facebook I look at every so often, and Instagram rarely now. But I find that I've definitely found you kind of get Twitter followers and split into two. People who have been a long-standing Twitter follower who just like the style and the content. But I'm also aware that it's a slightly on a downward trajectory, I would say, if I'm honest, because I think the way that Instagram and Facebook have based their content on algorithms, so they find you things that you're interested in, has really meant that people instantly can go on and they can go, right, I want to see about football, rugby, do a search, find a thing, find it, follow it. You then got video content. Where Twitter is basically a timeline feed. And so if I post something at 8 o'clock in the evening, that will appear at 8 o'clock. There's ways to get around it. And there's Hootsuite, which I use sometimes when I'm planning to release things in the evening, and I might do it at lunchtime or early in the morning. But essentially it's a timeline, which I know that a lot of people found that quite restricting. But I like it. I think it still has a place and still has a relevance. So I will continue using that as a medium. So I've kind of talked about what the basis of it is, the ideas of the different types of social media. And I think that's just on the fun part, my first part of this is to think about each of the social medias. They provide different things for different people. And you should, I haven't even mentioned LinkedIn. And that's for professionals. It's another thing that I have an account and actively use with for my corporate employees, people that I work with, and colleagues and stuff. So that's very useful and can link people. But that's the thing. Professionals will go to LinkedIn. Facebook covers virtually almost all demographics now. Twitter sort of fits someone who just wants to have a quick glance of social media, keep updated with things that are going on with particular people. Instagram is photographs and video content. Snapchat was for photos as well. So I think Snapchat was for younger people. Facebook pretty much covered all demographics. Twitter sort of had all demographics. Instagram is more on the younger side of people, but I definitely know that people that use it can be across ages. But they're definitely looking. You need to respect what the medium that you want to do it for. So if you want to do with business and with corporate environments, then LinkedIn is the right way. If you want to cover the biggest number of people, Facebook is the right one. You just need to think about where you're providing and what you're looking at. So I think that's something that people do underestimate, and I think it's definitely worth flagging at this point that it does make a big difference the type of social media that you use or view. So that's one part of my thoughts. The other part I wanted to just talk about was slightly to do with Silicon Valley. And now I know that Silicon Valley covers more than social media, but let's just think about social media, Silicon Valley as a sort of entity at the moment. Again, it's an area of positive and negative. A lot of positives are that it's condensed an area of America, which is basically there to be able to supplement IT, whether it's Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. They've all got in Silicon Valley, and so it's condensed and it's made a hell of a lot of money for quite a lot of people just moving there and getting in the right network circles. So that's, it can be seen as a good. It can be seen quite bad for anyone that isn't white, isn't middle class, isn't this sort of doesn't necessarily have to be from a really good college in the US, but it does help, I'm sure. So blacks, Chinese, whatever it is, Hispanics are traditionally not catered for as well in Silicon Valley. Then you also then have to consider that it's bad for women. Women, I know a little bit about how Google runs its businesses in the UK, and they feed. What's interesting is they've got free food and free drinks, and basically their intention is to keep their workforce there in morning, lunchtime and evenings because they're providing them with free food. Now that's a very clever way of getting dedicated people working for you, but it's not so good for women if they've got kids. So and it could be for men as well. It sounds I don't want to just say that it's women that look after their kids or pick up their kids, etc. But I would say that because mainly women are the sort of home, the people who look after the home, as I said, it's not always, they're the people who suffer with the sort of Silicon Valley atmosphere, and so I think that's something that they need to do more about. They need to think how is the best way to be able to market, to be able to get the really good women. Also, IT generally, techies are generally men as well. It's not exclusively, but generally they are. So that kind of doesn't help the whole Silicon Valley and social media for being better for other diverse groups. So I think that just needs to be just flagged, and let's think about that as whether social media, come back to social media is actually a positive or a negative. So we've thought about it from a user, we've thought about it from a like an employee. The next I just wanted to talk about was, so Mark Zuckerberg. I've seen a couple of things with him, interviews on YouTube, and I found it quite interesting that he talks very much about his team and his environment and how he sits with his colleagues, and talks very much about a team ethic. Now, it's whether you believe it on face value. I think generally that's what he intends his teams to be. But I also think that there probably is favourites. There's probably I don't want to go too much into this, but I just want you to think about the way Mark Zuckerberg has conducted his career. He has talked very much about the uniting of people, but we also know the sort of darker side of selling advertising and stuff on there as well, and that is across all mediums. So that's just a thing to maybe just mull over. The other thing that struck me recently was, so probably a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, I'm not sure, Periscope appeared, which was a live feed where you could sit there and live talk to people about a subject. When I got an account, there were people on computer games. Obviously, I just had a camera of them playing computer games. There was some relatively famous people sitting in meetings or talking about certain things that they wanted to discuss. There were people just ranting, and it was a medium which was being tested. I think Google did actually own it, Periscope. I think there was an alternative which wasn't wasn't getting so much traction. And there was a lot of sort of, well, what is the use of this? Now, what I find interesting is I've talked about Apple and Android, where Android are the innovators and Apple very often take it and do it better. Basically, Facebook Live, as far as I can see, is Periscope, but on the Facebook medium. So,
we'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe, and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
They're not necessarily at the stage of their business or their corporate environment that they will always be the innovators, and I think that's just. I don't think that's just this part of technology. I think all across all technologies, you have companies that are more innovative, and then you also have companies that are more profitable by using that technology or understanding that technology and being able to make it into something better, which has a bigger impact. So it's always one of those interesting things for me that it's not always the innovators who are the most profitable. So talking about social media companies, slightly back to social media companies, I think they've now admitted that they're more than just their social media. So they've now branded themselves as AI, involved in AI and development of AI, AR and VR. They've diversified, which it totally makes sense for me as looking at a business from an outset. You wanted to be able to diversify your business as much as possible, and so Google are big in AI, but I know Google's not necessarily strictly social media, so I'm just going to flex them in because they've developed hardware, software, they've developed their search engine, and I think it's interesting that they've got Google Maps, they've got Google Mail, and all these things have just come from a search engine which made them a hell of a lot of money and made them hugely successful. So I would say Facebook are very good at diversifying. They've done a lot in AR and VR. It would be nice to see other social media companies being able to flex their muscles. Now, none of them are on the same size as Facebook, but it would be interesting for them to maybe take up something slightly different so that they've got less reliance on just being a social media platform. So that the other thing is all these companies now, I sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that they're all big businesses now. I don't think any of them, if they're not affiliated to Facebook, Google, or Apple, then they've been able to build their business into a large diversified business. So this startup mentality, I think even Zuckerberg's had to change the way that he talks and the way that he does things, because he's now more of a corporate owner rather than just a startup where he started 10 years ago or whatever it was. So yeah, I think we just need to accept that they aren't startups now, and we shouldn't be expecting them to act like startups. Although saying that, some of the best businesses that I've been involved in, and they can keep a startup mentality even when they are now big businesses. And I think a lot of corporations are investing innovation, money in innovation, and trying to push boundaries to be able to be a little bit more like a startup, which I think is very good. And partnering with other startups is incredibly useful as well. So I think that's just generally, I think that's a good thing. So just on to the last section, just sort of, what we touched on at the start was, I think it can be a force for good. I also think it can be a force for bad. I also think, coming back to a user point of view, which is probably the most important for most people that are listening to this, we kind of should try and get less reliance on them, so that when we're, I don't know, sitting down eating, I don't do this myself, but sitting down eating dinner, we're looking on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn is kind of a bad thing. We should still be trying to have social contact with people that we live with, wives, girlfriends, mums, dads, whoever you live with. So, and we should continue to have relationships with people that we meet up with, and you have that sort of physical eye-to-eye contact. Even Skypes and things like that are difficult to do to really get a feel for the conversation, but in a way they're kind of better than nothing. So I think that's something we should always think about. Second thing is, I don't think it would do us any harm to have some sort of downtime, especially if you're finding yourself a little bit more addicted to it. Because if you do have any sort of addiction, like a feeling of addiction to it, any addiction is a bad thing, whether it's smoking, drinking, drugs, whatever it is. Doing things to an excess is not a positive way to be able to lead your life. So maybe think about having some sort of downtime, maybe a weekend, a week, a month, whatever you feel is necessary, and just don't use it, and just maybe call people up and have a chat with people, or do other things, be a producer, not just a passive viewer. So I think everyone should kind of think about that if they feel they've got some sort of problem, or a slight addiction. Doesn't have to be a full-blown addiction. And also, if you're back on the point of being a producer, not a consumer, social media can be incredibly powerful for businesses, and you can sell products and services on social media. It gives you a whole different marketing strategy, which a lot of it can be free. You do have to pay for some of it with Twitter feeds and Google AdWords and Facebook pages and advertising there. But it's worth thinking if you're starting a business, or even if you're not just starting, you want to do something specific and be able to publicize it, social media is a brilliant way of reaching people that you wouldn't necessarily reach initially. So I would say that's something which maybe most people don't think enough about, but I would definitely promote that. And so my last thought, my sort of conclusion is, if social media is used in the right way, it can be an incredibly powerful and empowering tool. And we should all think about how to use it as the user, as the employee, as a regulator. We haven't really talked about regulation because there isn't much there. As an advertiser, and so as a business owner. So I would say, think about how to use it and how the best way for you to be able to use it is, and get out there and start producing stuff on it, because it's quite interesting to see the sort of responses you can get on it. So that's my final thoughts. Please can you follow me on Twitter? Please can you subscribe to me on YouTube? Like anything that you like. Add any comments on YouTube or Twitter, anything that you want to say, or add any comments to LibSync on this podcast as well. So final thing, thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon.